Kaboom?
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
Kaboom indeed. Just like most disciplines, sound design too has some techniques that every sound designer is destined to use at some point. They might not have a name for it, they might not do it consciously, but they will do it. And one of the really big ones are what I, and surely also many others, call double transients. When used tastefully and consciously, they can be one of the most powerful and universal assets to shape a soundscape. A true secret sound design sauce, hidden in plain sight. But before looking at the magic of double transients, let's first have a quick look at what transients actually are. In general, a transient can be defined as the short burst of energy in the beginning of a sound that creates a peak in the amplitude. Good examples would be a kick drum, a gunshot recording, or even just playing the guitar. In all three examples, you can see that the amplitude suddenly peaks. Let's hear those examples again, but only play their transients. Once again, but this time we play everything but the transients. As you can hear, without the transients, the sounds miss that initial snap that really catches our attention and makes the sound feel impactful. With that out of the way, let's get back to double transients. As the name suggests, the core idea is it to use two transients in a somewhat quick succession. But that doesn't sound too amazing, right? Well, yeah. In pretty much all cases, just copy-pasting the original transient won't really do the trick. After all, we don't say ka-ka or bo-boom, right? We say kaboom. So what about... Now that sounds a lot more compelling, right? All examples use double transients. We can even quite literally see it in the waveforms. Every sound can be visually divided in a ka and a boom part. But what exactly is going on here? Why does it sound so neat? Well, let me take you on a trip through history. Legend has it that the first mention of double transients dates back to ancient Rome, when two Roman sound designers had a little talk and one said to the other, "You know, when using these double transients, it's almost as if I'm prolonging the attack part of the sound, but also building anticipation and creating a sense of rhythm." Now, some might argue that this is just a poorly executed joke I made up because I was lacking a proper transition. But I say that the core message stands. Double transients engage our brains in multiple ways that could be considered exciting and/or satisfying. Let's start with the attack. Attack describes the initial part of a sound. Or another way to put it, it is the time until the sound is fully there. A very short attack results in a snappy sound. A long attack means that the sound is slowly fading in. Sounds with a short attack and crisp transients, such as gunshots and explosions, are great at catching our attention. However, as the name suggests, a short attack time means that the attack part of the sound is, well, short. This is where double transients enter the stage. They effectively allow us to prolong the attack part of our sounds. The initial transient, the ka, catches our attention. However, it isn't until the second transient, the boom, that the sound truly unfolds. And given that the first transient probably made us listen closer to the sound, we'll be a lot more aware of the second transient, giving it a greater impact. Which neatly brings us to the second point, anticipation. It's pretty much a rule of thumb. Where there is audio and entertainment, anticipation can't be far. Sometimes it takes the form of elements that clearly communicate to us that they are leading up to something, like break parts in music. And sometimes it takes the form of the absence of elements. An iconic example in the sound design world for this would be the seismic charge from Star Wars. The sudden removal of any sound before the charge goes off makes its impact much, much stronger and imposing. It's also why it's a common theme in horror movies to ever so slowly strip away the music and soundscape before a jump scare happens. We might not pick up on the gradual removal, but we're subconsciously aware that everything seems to be way too quiet, eerily quiet, and anticipate something to happen. Definitely helps with an effective butt-cheek clenching workout. Double transients, in a way, combine both worlds within a very short time frame. When the initial transient, remember the Ka, hits and primes our ears, we expect to hear the full blow of whatever we are listening to. However, those tiny moments that follow don't give us the sweet release. They leave us in the air, anticipating the boom to finally hit. And when it eventually does, it's oh so sweetly satisfying. We can actually observe ourselves in this anticipation process. Say kaboom out loud, or think the word in your head. Now try to emphasize it somehow, be it by nodding your head or making a gesture with your hand. Chances are, the emphasis was on the boom and not the ka. Finally, let's talk about rhythm. I think it's safe to say that we humans are generally quite fond of grooves and rhythmic patterns. Double transients add the sense of rhythm, or groove, to sounds that would otherwise just be that, some sounds. This becomes especially effective when these sounds can be anticipated beforehand, for example when they are linked to firing a weapon or picking up a special item in a video game. In these cases, the player had the chance to anticipate or even steer the events and be rewarded with that sweet, satisfying sound. Sure, a double transient is not exactly a complex rhythm, but it's still a rhythm that people can look forward and bob their head to. Now at this point, I feel like I owe a little apology. You see, I like things that go boom, or well, kaboom. The examples I've brought up so far might lead to the impression that double transients only work when trying to convey some sort of powerful, mighty impact. But the principle of attack, anticipation, and rhythm works for so much more. Want an example? Or how about an absolute classic, the satisfying cash register sound? As a matter of fact, I was thinking about what would be the non-explosive equivalent to kaboom, and finally ended up on this one, KaChing. It has a somewhat timeless feel, given that most of these old cash registers are not around anymore, but pop culture kinda keeps it alive. So, let's listen to some more non-explosive examples and manifest the KaChing. With all that said, there is one more question that I feel is worth answering. If double transients are so satisfying, why not use it, everywhere? I personally think there are multiple answers, each with a varying degree of objectivity. The one that came the quickest and most natural to me is the following. Above all, double transients are a stylistic device. If and in what quantity they fit may largely depend on the rest of the soundscape. And like most other stylistic devices, using them inflationary might simply feel like too much and stick out in a negative way. Some other answers pretty much write themselves. Namely, if we stop thinking about double transients merely as some stylistic device we can sprinkle in because it sounds nice. Instead, let's think about some deeper purpose we can give them. The two most common purposes I can think of off the top of my head are emphasize powerful events and reward finding or doing something special. A classic emphasis on powerful events can be found in many shooter games. The game has a pistol? Cool. How do we make the more powerful revolver sound, well, more powerful? Yeah, kaboom. And as for rewarding, finding, or doing something special, classic examples would be the usage of powerful spells in RPGs, or landing headshots in shooter games. The basic idea is that we deliberately restrict the usage of double transients by setting ourselves rules on when to use them. On the one hand, this can help with not overusing the effect, but it also emphasizes these powerful or special events and makes getting them even more desirable for players. There is a reason why opening loot boxes or unlocking a money-based reward usually has a rich, satisfying and almost comically over-designed sound in many games. Finally, there can be some very pragmatic reasons for not using double transients, especially when doing video game sound design. We talked about how rhythm is one of their 3 core pillars. But what if that's something we really don't want? The most recent example I noticed personally can be found in Baldur's Gate 3. Don't get me wrong, the game's sound design is absolutely fantastic. But let's have a listen at the sound for selling items. Oh look, it's a double transient shuffle sound coupled with the high-frequency coin sprinkle. Now, while the sound itself is very satisfying, hearing these 2 transients always makes me think I accidentally sold 2 items rather than just the one I actually wanted to sell. It doesn't help that the sound either uses different samples and/or randomizes the time between these 2 transients each time, which makes it even more confusing because it never really establishes a rhythm. Another pitfall lies within the realms of the anticipation part of our holy trinity of double transients. In order to build anticipation, we need some time to do it. And this delay between the added transient and the quote-unquote actual sound might just be one of the biggest pitfalls there is, especially when dealing with video game sound design. On the one hand, many actions and events in video games can't really be anticipated. They happen based on player input. This means that, in most cases, the anticipation phase of our sound can only really start after the player input. On the other hand, most of the times, players expect a quick and snappy feedback to their actions. Too much of a delay between the first and second transient can result in a sound that feels disconnected to what is happening on screen. In these cases, it's all about finding the right balance between anticipation and snappiness. In conclusion, double transients are a powerful sound design tool that combine an emphasis on the attack phase of a sound with the magic of anticipation and rhythm. There is a good reason why you can find them almost everywhere, but as a sound designer, try not to overdo it and maybe think about whether or not you could assign them a purpose in order to communicate a clearer message to the player. I also do apologize for the fact that you might not be able to unhear them anymore. As a matter of fact, I'd be curious to know if you can think of some nice examples of great double transient usage yourself. And one last thing before I finish. You might have noticed that I've been uploading a bit more lately. That's because I realized how much I enjoy talking about sound design in a manner that, hopefully, makes the content accessible for non-sound designers as well. I don't plan to become a full-time YouTuber or any of the sort, nor do I intend to have a fixed upload schedule, but as long as there are topics to talk about and I feel like it, I'll continue. So if you've got any sound design related questions, please do let me know. And if you think some people might find the sort of stuff interesting as well, do spread the word. Anyway, that's it for today. So, thanks and have a good one.